Hi, this is Ryan with Tremonti. I wanted to touch on large language models, but not the technology itself, the technology deployed to counter the technology, I guess. So indicative of our times that we would use a technology to counter another technology. Can't think of more novel approaches than that. Come on, guys. But here we are with AI detection models, and they're even worse than the technology itself. So I'm taking LLMs with the equivalent of a shoulder shrug emoji. I think they're just as much of a problem as they are a solution. Uh, Good in a lot of ways, but pretty bad in a lot of ways as well. And the companies like ChatGPT, Bard, and Facebook are just going to use them to profit as much as they can from us. And fine, that's their prerogative. But we should also take a very cynical approach, knowing that, to the technologies that are being deployed, because right now it's a race to try and get the products out as fast as they can, whatever the consequences. So one of these weird consequences was all of these morally shady people. Wired just did an expose on one, basically just uh, leaping praise on the person for having no moral compass. It was very quixotic. But yeah, these people in these companies wanted the publicity that came with being an adjacent technology, whether it's offering training or bolt-ons to the LLM, in this case, a countermeasure in AI detection models, and their bunk. These people are snake oil salesmen. The detection is terrible, hilariously terrible. And it's sometimes hilarious, but it also has real world consequences. And I think that those consequences are kind of being muted by the fact that there are hilarious studies and anecdotal evidence saying, well, these detection models are thinking that an AI wrote the Constitution because of how they operate. I myself had a kind of a coming to Jesus moment with these AI detection models because I wanted to hook it into a security service, but I realized that, I wasn't asking the right questions. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to clarify my position on technology. So I am something of, I guess, a Luddite because I hate technology. I guess I hate NFTs. I hate crypto. And probably odds are good that I'll hate the next snazzy tech that an executive clumsily introduces into a shareholder meeting to artificially drive up stock prices. So I hate LLMs pretty much, but I really hate these anti-LLM AI detection models because in a rush to fill a void that these LLMs created, these companies, very dubious companies, introduced something that does not work. And I take real issue with that. And I understand that there's this rush whenever we have a big thing that we're facing, whether it's COVID or something else, to introduce something and we don't really put in guardrails in place and we don't really properly understand what the consequences would be until it's too late and there's already been this big impact. And you can see it. And I would just like to offer the perspective that maybe we're trying to ask the wrong questions when we're trying to figure out whether something was written by the equivalent of a sophisticated chatbot, but not really sophisticated. And I'll get to that. I think that in my own case, I wasn't really concerned about whether or not, or I shouldn't have been concerned about whether or not it was written by ChatGPT. I should, for security, but in the context of security, be more concerned about like these other calling cards that I can look to and hone in on. And I think that rings true for other areas as well. And I think that the best case, because it seems to be used so often, is in academia. And I think professors are, by and large, being sold something that is worthless and are therefore taking action, grading papers accordingly. And the results are bad. They're suboptimal, as it's saying technology. So I think that there's some laziness on the professors, because if you stop for a second to ask yourself, am I asking the right question? I think you could come easily to the answer that no, I should not really care about whether or not ChatGPT wrote some or all of this paper, because the content itself should be what I'm grading. The student in this scenario where they leveraged ChatGPT still needed to ask good questions to produce good content, and that in and of itself is a skill. But not only that, these LLMs are not sophisticated when it comes to writing style. And I think that they also would need to be a very good editor, and that is a skill. So I think that you can grade a paper on the merits still, that of the content, the quality of the content, rather than having this X factor of whether or not it was written partially or entirely by an LLM. And that's where I want to come back to, I'd feel better if I were to put myself in the shoes of a professor out there, not knowing that a paper was some or all written by ChatGPT, then basically flipping a coin to decide whether or not I fail a student. So I'm not into the glitz. You can call me a Luddite. People have pointed out in my tutorials that my mic sounds like it was a potato. But to that I say, I would rather focus on the meat than the potatoes. Please, as you use these new tools, give them the cynicism that they are owed, and know that the people behind the tools are not acting in your best interests. Thank you.